Okay, so we are on step 17. We're going to install the IC sockets on this board. This is going to hold our chips because when we're done, the USA will flash in a sequence pattern of U only, all off, US. So the US will come on, then they'll go off, and then the USA will come on, then they'll go off, and then it'll flash USA a couple of times, and we'll have a speed control to determine that sequence. But in order to do that, we're going to have to install some chips. Before we get into chips, we're going to have to install a socket because it's hard. The chips have tiny little pins. Now, this chip would precursor to a microchip, for like a computer has a multitude, a lot more of these tiny little pins that you couldn't solder. But these pins right here are a little bit bigger, so we can solder them to do a simple blink and repeat sequence. But before we do that, we're going to have to install these sockets, because if we have something damaged or whatever, for whatever reason, we can pop it out and put a new one in. So first thing I did before I ever put any solder, did anything else, is I tinned each one of these pads. I tinned the 4017 and the 555. So I applied solder to each one of these pads on both of these. Okay. Then I took my chip, because we're doing surface mount, and I flattened it with my fingers. I took my fingers on here and I just pushed it flat, so it appears to be, looks like that. So I took my fingers and I pushed it flat. Don't go too crazy on it. We don't have to worry about shorting out like on the USB connector because it's not metal. All right. Next, most importantly, because once you start this, if you did this wrong, you're going to have problems. There is a direction, because these chips have a positive and negative and a pin out, and they have to go in there the right way. So there's an identifier. They can go in backwards. So look, there's a little notch cut out right here. If I look right here on this chip holder, do I see the little notch? On my socket, I also see a notch. I know that's hard to see. Let's see if we can get a close-up. You'll see the little notch. That notch must match the picture on the board, so make sure you put it on the picture on the board, just like so. We're going to go in here. I'm simply going to lay this down. You might want to use a pair of pliers to hold this in place, or just you can use this solder tool. But once I have this done, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through here and roll the solder up on this chip or socket. Let's get over here and let's see how close we can get. And I'm going to quickly do it. If you spend too long, you're going to heat this up. It's all plastic. You're going to deform the chip or the socket and have issues. So I'm going to come through here. You can use, if you use your finger, you need to watch it. Let's see how close we are. All I'm looking to do is heat that solder up and kind of roll it up onto the pin. We're looking to roll that up onto the pin. So let's see how. I want to make sure that it is completely lined up. All the pads are in the center of the solder. Remember, I've already tinned these pads. I'm not going to apply any solder to my soldering iron. I'm simply going to quickly heat up the solder applied to the pad and try to push it over the top. And so I'm going to start on one side and work my way down. I'm applying pressure, so as I push on it, it should push in there. So I'm going to come down here quickly, don't dally, just kind of push on it. And now I'm going to let that set for a little bit and cool off and repeat to the other side. So I'm going to turn my board around and we'll do this again. we can get up a little bit better focus. All right, now I'm going to proceed to the other side. I don't know how close I can get. Get a better perspective right there. But I'm going to roll the solder up. I've already applied the solder. I don't have to do anything else. I'm simply going to go through here and get it sunk into the pins. This side's going to be more difficult because I already have a chip on one side, so make sure you don't hit this chip and melt it. So I'm going to come through here, applying some pressure. You might even at this point just apply some pressure. I'm going to come through here, and I'm just simply going to try to roll that up. Make sure you short them out. You're going to have to remove some of the solder. And we're going to roll that up. Now I'm going to inspect my work because I quickly did that. I want to make sure that all my pins were soldered. And as I look through here, I'll see that possibly I have a tiny bit of solder that might accidentally touch between these two pins right here. I have a tool for that. I'm going to come through here, maybe with my smaller size tool, and just kind of pick that little piece of solder out of there. I don't want it shorting out, so I'm just going to kind of pick that out a little bit. Make sure that it's not going to short out. I don't really think it's attached to anything. It's just some extra. You might want to even clean this and get your wire brush. Going to knock that solder. There it goes. It's gone. The solder between there, and as you can see, the solder is not touching. And let's go on to this other chip because I have a cold solder joint on it. Also, it's slightly crooked, which is my fault. Once you start, you can't stop. But it's not too terribly bad, so I'm going to go with it, but it is slightly crooked on the board. So it's hard to tell on this video. You can look right here and see that there's a different height between this back part right here. See the little line? You can tell it's on there a little crooked. So after inspecting this and I soldered the other chip, I noticed that on the end I had this one last pin. Looks to me like it did not seat very well, and if I push on it, I can see it wiggle ever so slightly. And so you're going to have to do a visual inspection of these boards. It looks like it could be a good solder, but I have my doubts. And if I have an errant pin not making good connection on one of these, it's going to lead to a lot of troubleshooting issues. So I'm going to come back through here and apply. I'm not going to apply any more solder, but I don't have to. I think I can just get away with applying a little bit more heat once my board's cooled off. So I'm going to apply some pressure. Actually, I'm going to use this one. I like this one. A little point. I'm just going to apply some pressure on that pin that I think might possibly be a cold solder. All right, so I'm going to apply this and simply hit it again with some heat. Try to push that pin down in there. Be careful about, you might even need to apply just a little bit of solder to your board. I'm going to hold it in place and then re-inspect my work. I'm not going to sit here and keep after this. I'm going to just apply a little bit of heat, let it cool off. Appears that I pushed it down a little bit and it's probably making a good connection. I did get some rosin on my board, so I want to make sure that I clean that off so it's nice and neat. Might as well clean them all. Clean them all off. some of that rosin off there because we applied a lot of heat in a little bit of time, and sometimes that'll burn it up. So now that I've installed my chips, we are not ready to insert the microchip or the IC chip, integrated chip, into this board. In fact, leave those in the package. I want to show you why you want to leave those in the package. If you look right now, you'll see those tiny little pins, and they're just kind of floating. If you put this in your backpack or throw it around or set your book on it, you're going to bend those pins and they're going to break, and you have to straighten them, and possibly it won't work because those pins have to fit down inside that socket you just put on there. So watch that, and we'll go on to the next part later.